Hello folks, welcome back to another episode of Stoner TV here at New Viso, coming to you from Leipzig, Germany. And today we've got a very interesting subject. It's kind of like some basic knowledge. And we're going to talk about a red thread that seems to me underlying human history, the development of history. And there's a red thread, there's some hidden knowledge, some secret knowledge, and that seems to me to be like an engine of battles, of wars, of global politics. And what we're going to do today is kind of establishing a mind map, a certain map of places that are connected to this, and it's all about ancient secret knowledge. The basic idea of this thing is that the great ancient cultures, like especially Egypt and the buildings of the pyramids and stuff, the main idea is that this didn't come just out of nothing, but that there was a culture before, a high culture, that was inspiring new cultures. And of course, this idea is nothing new. You could call this older culture. You could call it Atlantis. You could give it another name, but you see, this is an old idea. And it stands ground if you look at the buildings like the pyramids, the Great Pyramid on Giza. I'm not the first one to say, hey, maybe this has more to do with some technology than it is a tomb or a grave for some pharaoh. So the idea is that there is ancient technology, ancient knowledge, ancient wisdom as well, and that some parts of this heritage is still here on Earth, and it's not everything is not combined anymore. It's shattered at different places, and yeah, this is what we're gonna do, kind of trying figure out a sort of a mind map to this stuff. So we're going to start with Egypt. I'm not going to start before, this is maybe another stuff, but we're going to start with Egypt and start with the story that when the Hebrews went out of Egypt. This is all in the Bible. It's in the books of Moses, and the story goes that the Hebrews were like slaves in Egypt, and under the leadership of Moses, they fled Egypt. And then started the Jerusalem and stuff. Now, first thing I want to point to is the name Moses. That already is interesting, because Moses, that sounds like an Egyptian name, doesn't it? I mean, we've all these pharaohs like Moses and stuff. Moses it sounds Egyptian, and it's a good question. What about the Hebrews in Egypt? What role did they have? Were they really just slaves, you know, working on the fields, getting the whip? And was it like that, or did at least some of them already have were part of the state, had influence on the court of the pharaohs and stuff? And the idea is that when the Hebrews fled Egypt, that they took some of the stuff with them. Whether it was belonging to them or whether they stole it, this is not a part of our look today, and we don't know. Probably Moses thought that the stuff belongs to him, and the Pharaoh, maybe that's why the Pharaoh sent the entire army after them, because he said, hey, these guys are taking important stuff from us, which is our heritage. And of course, in the book of Moses and for all religious people, these artifacts that are in this story, they are all divine. You know, this is divine stuff. And there's, in this story of Moses, there's a whole bunch of amazing things that are happening that have to do with energy, stuff like the burning bush, this phenomena, and things like that. And of course, in the narrative that is given by the Bible, this is all divine. It's divine miracles. It's God, you know, God interacting with the people. But we might also have another perspective on that we're not talking about divine stuff, but that we're talking about artifacts that are of not of divine nature, but of technological nature. Technology that was coming from this older civilization, whatever nature that is. I mean, I'm not going to talk about that today, whether it is some alien civilization or whatever that is. I'm not going to talk about that. But what I say is, it looks to me as if we're talking about technological artifacts in the Old Testament there. And one of the most important ones, of course, is this one. And this is only fantasy how it's designed. But it points to that direction. And this is the so-called Ark of the Covenant, the Bundeslade, as we call it in German. And this is all to do with Moses. And this is an artifact, a piece, that there are strange stories going around that. In the Old Testament, there were really strict rules how to deal with this piece. You could not get near it, you could not just touch it. There's stories that when you do something wrong, when you touch it in a wrong way, there's coming flashes out, and we're dealing with energy, and people were dying that. Of course, they were saying, oh, you die by the stroke of God, but and we're talking about an technical phenomenon and of some sort of energy that is emanating out of this piece. And there's many stories, and we might focus the entire hour only on the Ark of the Covenant and maybe its connections that it has with the pyramids. Some people say that the measures of this piece are exactly the measures of the so-called sarcophag in the king's chamber in the Gizeh, in the Great Pyramid of Gizeh. So it seems to me that we're talking about an artificial artifact, about something technological. Yeah? And this stuff that is, so to say, the heritage of an old high-tech culture, this caught the desire of power-seeking people through all ages. And already at that time, this is why the Pharaoh was so keen of getting the Hebrews back. Because he wanted the stuff back, not only a few hundred or 1,000 people. That was not so important. It was the stuff. So this and here's also an interesting picture. I don't have so many pictures today because for this stuff, I mean, most of it is secret, and well, what can we show there? But we got some pictures here also of this scenario that the Ark of the Covenant and the impact it had on the people. This is something really strange. You can tell to the simple people, hey, this is divine, but it's also like a confrontation of simple people to some really to some high-tech artifact that you don't really know what to do with. That's also one big question. Did these people in that time or throughout the history that we're going to talk here today, did they know how to use this technology? I don't know. This is speculation. Maybe people like Moses still had a clue of what this is and how to use it. Maybe not. Maybe they were just preserving it because they knew this is something special, though you even don't know anymore how to use this stuff. That's not sure. But the thing is that these artifacts, and it's not only technical artifacts. That's only one part of ancient knowledge. We also talk about maps, which is a very important point, the geometry of the earth. We're talking about maps, we're talking about spiritual wisdom as well. This will also be part of this today. And so it's an entire pack, and I just call it ancient knowledge. This stuff was brought to Jerusalem, and there the temple was built. Actually, the temple, the Solomonic temple, it was built to have a place, to have a home, so to say, for these artifacts. That's the main thing, and that's why this temple of Jerusalem and Jerusalem is until nowadays such a hot spot. Yeah, and already when we talk about the first temple, just keep in mind that many of our modern secret societies, such as the Freemasons, they themselves see themselves in a continuity, in a tradition that goes all the way back to the first Solomonic temple. So already there you have this connection of secret societies that are gaining or that want to achieve power, and the interest to get a hold on these artifacts, because that's what secret societies are about. So it's interesting, Jerusalem, there they built this temple for this, and then came for Jerusalem and for the Jews, there came different enemies in the country. And the first outside enemy that made war with the Jewish state and won the war, that was Babylon. And if I remember right, it was the king Nebuchadnezzar, who was the first one to get control of this temple of Jerusalem. And of course, they wanted to plunder as much as possible. In the temple, we're also talking about wealth, of course, gold. Some of these artifacts, just the material might be of high value. Yeah? So Nebuchadnezzar, when he overran the Jews, he took all the stuff out of the temple that he could find, and then he also took the elites of the Hebrews. Took him hostage, and that's when the story goes on the shores of Babylon, and when they were in exile there. And this is very important also for the development of the Jewish belief and culture systems. This Babylon exile, this is very important. But for us today, it's already enough to know that some of the stuff was most likely plundered by Nebuchadnezzar and brought to Babylon, which is nowadays the country of Iraq. Iraq is between Euphrates and Tigris. Those two rivers, they define, so to say, the ancient Babylon. And nowadays it's Iraq. And isn't it interesting, just to make a little jump into our days, when there was it the Second or the Third Gulf War, when the American army and military first invaded Baghdad. Now there's, and I would call it more than rumors, but I cannot 100% verify it, of course, because I wasn't there. But there's rumors going that some of these militaries, they had also scientific specialists with them, and the first thing that they approached in Baghdad and in Iraq was the ancient archaeological sites and secure them, and most important, the National Museum of Baghdad, in which basement is the store for thousands, hundreds of thousands of artifacts of archaeological nature that were found in Iraq and Babylon. So that's interesting, huh? I mean, some of this old stuff in Nebuchadnezzar times went to Babylon and stayed there for over thousands of years, and now in this Gulf War they try to get a hold on it as quickly as possible. Yeah? That's interesting. Yeah? So let's go back to Jerusalem. So when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the Solomonic temple and plundered it, sooner or later the Jews recovered themselves, and under the regency of Herod, a new temple was built. This is then the so-called Second Temple, and then the Romans came. But I also want to explain Jerusalem. This is a special place. You know, this temple, it's on a plateau hill, and this is a very ancient cultural site. And this hill, it's got a lot of caves and hideouts within the mountain itself. And of course, it's very much likely that before the Babylonians approached, that they were trying to hide most of the stuff, to hide it, to get it away. You can't get it too much away because, I mean, stuff like this you cannot just carry around, you know. But the most important stuff they wanted to hide so it doesn't fall in enemies' hands. And that's why Jerusalem, also after Babylon and also after Rome and all this stuff, until the nowadays, is still one of those hotspots where it's very much likely that there is some of this old stuff still there in the mountain. And nowadays, in Jerusalem, you cannot dig for these things. Archaeology is not possible on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It's just not possible. I mean, in the moment that you open one of these caves just to investigate it, last time somebody did this, an entire intifada broke loose, because of course the Muslims are very keen on every sort of archaeology that's happening there. I tell you, in Jerusalem, every archaeology is a political thing, everything, you know. So it's a situation that we cannot freely, just by our nature of wanting to know how things are going, we cannot go there and observe the entire place. It's just not possible in Jerusalem. This is too hot. So it's still very much likely that to our days that in this Temple Mount we might even find some of these old traces. So what I want to say is, whoever plundered Jerusalem, they didn't get a hold on all of it. And we don't know exactly how this thing went. But of course, Nebuchadnezzar was the first to plunder Jerusalem. Then came the Romans. That was in the time after Christ. There was the so-called Judean Roman War. And that was a heavy war. Very interesting story, but today I only want to focus on that the Romans sent their best troops into the country to break down the resistance of the Jews, which was interesting because the Jews, what they didn't want, they had their monotheism, they had their God, and what they did not accept that what was used in Roman Empire, that where the Roman Empire was tolerant towards all religions in its empire. Hey, you can pray to whatever God you like, but we want in all the temples, no matter for who you build your temples, we want also a little share, a little adulation for the emperor, for the Caesar, just to show that we are the lords. And this is what, of course, the Jews resisted. They said, no, we cannot do this in our temple. There will be no statue of any Roman emperor. This is we cannot do it. So this is where this began, and yeah, the Romans sent their best troops, actually led by the Flavians, and this is also an interesting story. And I have to look at it. I don't digress all the time because it's interesting stuff. But for now, it's enough to say that these Flavians, they fought kind of a total war against the Jewish country, and they destroyed the temple, and of course they were also plundering massively stuff of this temple treasure, and brought the stuff to Rome. We still can see here on the Ark of Titus, this is in Rome itself. In Rome you can see this, and many tourists have witnessed that. That's one of these big arcs of triumph, and this is an ark remembering this Roman Judean War, which was fought by the Flavians, and that shows how they brought all this temple treasures to Rome. You can see it quite obvious here. This is Jewish stuff. They robbed that from, the Romans robbed that from Jerusalem, brought it to Rome. And so now we're going to follow this thread. We will come back to Jerusalem, but now we follow this thread. What happened with the stuff that the Romans robbed from Jerusalem? Which, again, before the Jerusalems brought in from, the Hebrews brought in from Egypt. So what happened with this stuff? And Rome, of course, was very powerful, but a few hundred years later it was overrun by Germanic tribes, and it was the Goths, the Visigoths, if I remember right, that were the first ones to plunder Rome. And so the same thing happened again. When they plunder Rome, that wants to say they destroy what they can, but they take away, of course, all the treasures, everything of value, of course, metals, gold and stuff, but also anything of value. And there we are again at these old artifacts that have to do with technology, that have to do with knowledge. And so part of this Roman stuff, again, the Romans were trying to hide probably what they can, but there wasn't not so much possibility. So the Goths became a hand on this. And now this is leading to a very, very interesting part of history, because these Goths, after they plundered Rome, and it was a time when peoples were marching and all of Europe was in sort of a turmoil, these Gothic tribes then went westward, and for some generations they established a new capital in southern France, and their capital was at a place that is now a small village. But that's a very special place, and it's this one. It's called Rennes-le-Chateau, this small village here, Rennes-le-Chateau. Now it's really small, but in the times of when the Visigoths were there, this was the center of their power. And this is a special place as well. It's like similar to Jerusalem, interestingly. It's also a plateau hill, and on that hill is the little village. Nowadays, this is a very interesting place, and now it's kind of a hotspot for esoteric, for all kinds of researchers, freaks. I mean, this is interesting. If you at this place, you might meet interesting people, because there's a story of this Rennes-le-Chateau, and this goes back to 19th century. And there was the priest, the local priest of this church there, was a man called Abbé. And this Abbé, he was doing work in the church, and to renovate this, to get it in shape again. And at this works, below the altar, he claimed that he found information. He found cryptic texts which he was able to decipher, how do you call that? To make it, to get in clear writing, yeah? And that helped him find what he said. He found then in the surrounding area, he found artifacts. Now, we don't know exactly what he found. He didn't speak about it. But what we know, and this is the basics of this Rennes-le-Chateau story, this man got very rich in short times. But not only rich, but he became also very influential. Before, he was just an unknown priest of some small village. But after he found this stuff, already all of a sudden he was in correspondence with really powerful people of the church, but also of the state, and he was getting a man of influence. So this is a big story, and we might make an own episode just about Rennes-le-Chateau. And for those of you who want to dig deeper into this stuff, try out the book The Blood and the Grail. This is a very good book. It's written by 3 Englishmen from, actually these guys started for the BBC. They started a documentary for TV, but they dug so deep into it that they quit the BBC, and for the rest of their life they were researching this stuff. So it's, these 3 guys are called Lincoln, Bennett and Lay. Lincoln, Bennett, Lay, Blood and the Grail. This is really basic literature. It's coming from the 80s. It was very successful. It was a bestseller, this stuff. Actually, this is the stuff out of which an author like Dan Brown is weaving his stories. That's also a thing I want to mention. Dan Brown. I mean, these are great books. Okay, they're fascinating thrillers. But and I'm happy that some of this knowledge is getting a broader look. It's getting among the people. But the problem is that many people nowadays, if you talk about this stuff, they say, "Ah, that's Dan Brown. we saw it. We saw it in cinema. It's a movie. It's fiction." But that's not true. You know, this stuff is real. And then Dan Brown, out of this stuff, he makes fiction, which is fair. And he makes it in a good way, but he's not the one that. This is not just fiction. I mean, he's dealing with natural facts. So very, very interesting stuff, and just the success of Dan Brown shows that this is interesting stuff. This is inspiring. Yeah? Rennes-le-Chateau. Yeah? So some of this stuff, of these ancient artifacts, might have found their way all here to Rennes-le-Chateau. And then what happened afterwards, what Abbé Saunière did with the stuff, we don't know. But what we know is all of a sudden he got in contact with influential people, and of course also with influential people from certain secret societies. You know, there it comes together. So we don't know what happened to this. But what we say is, okay, this is ancient stuff that he found, powerful stuff, whatever sort of power that is. Now, when we're already in Rennes-le-Chateau, this is southern France. This is an interesting region anyway. I mean, this is the region also of the Cathares and the Grail, and I was talking to you about this stuff. When we're already there, we might hit another interesting subject, which is the Knights Templars. The Knights Templars. Now the name is already curious. What temple are we talking about? This is a Christian order, so shouldn't we talk about church? What temple are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the temple in Jerusalem. We're talking again about this temple mount that is the home, so to say, for these ancient artifacts. Now, the Knights Templar, they were founded at the age of the Crusades, and they were founded and they had their first headquarters in Jerusalem, exactly on this temple mount. That's where they were having their headquarters, and that's why they have this name, the Knights from the temple, so to say. And officially, the reason they founded themselves was to protect the pilgrims, the Christian pilgrims that want to pilgrim to Jerusalem to get on the traces of Jesus. Those orders were there to protect them. That's the official story. But what is interesting that it's written that the first thing that these temple knights did when they established themselves on the Temple Mount was they started digging. They started excavations. Now, what do you guess what were they looking for? Maybe some splinter of the cross of Jesus? Not really, not those guys. I go even as far, and I cannot prove it, but it's, from my perspective, I think this entire crusade thing was not about getting a hold of the holy sites, the Holy Land, to protect the pilgrims and stuff, to do a favor for Christianity. But I guess that this entire crusade, the main motivation behind it was to get a hold on Jerusalem. Because in Jerusalem, they thought you could still find remnants, leftovers of this ancient Solomonic treasure, so to say, which was then a treasure by Moses, which was then a treasure coming out of Egypt. And that's what I say. Yeah, maybe this was the main motivation of this entire crusade at all, to get a hold on Jerusalem, to get hold on the stuff. Whether that is or not, who knows? But what's for sure is that the Knights Templars, they started digging. And it's very much likely that they were also successful, that they found things. There's not only many rumors going on that about what they found, but what we see is similar like this Abyssinian story. Within a short time, this very small order got amazingly rich. They got amazingly influential. They got powerful. That's what it is. We're talking about power. And it seems that whoever gets a hand on this stuff is raising in power. Maybe that's exactly the motivation why everybody wants to get a hold on this, because this seems to be the source of some power, however that the nature of these artifacts is. So anyway, the Knights Templar, they got very rich. And they had a couple of centuries where they were really big. They were like a state. They had a state sovereignty, you know, even if they had not one empire or stuff, but they had many bases. But they were a sovereign state until nowadays. The Knights Templar or Knights of Malta, this is still a sovereign organization. They have their own passports. You know, if you belong to this exclusive club, you don't have to worry when you're on the line at some international airport. You know, you don't have to go in the big line. With this passport, you know, things are easy. But well, that's another thing. Yeah, but so the Templars, they got very rich and influential, and then they were busted. Big story. Make it in a short term. It was the French king and the Pope. They were teaming up against the Templars, and again, it was the ambition of getting a hold on the temple treasures. Now, the temple treasures, of course, it was also much gold. They were rich, but at the core of the temple treasures is the stuff that they brought from Jerusalem, and this is what they wanted to get a hold on. Now, the French king and the Pope. And this is also a very amazing story. We might talk a lot about this. But today I want to make this mind map, so I only want to focus in this subject here. The Templars, they knew what was coming, and they were taking the most important stuff of their treasure, which is not gold, masses of gold, but the most important stuff is information, is knowledge, in advance of their bust. They were getting this stuff out of the country. And this is a big subject on its own. What happened to the Templars' treasure? Wow, there's many books written on that, and there's many theories and possibilities where this stuff is now. And I only want to mention one, because we might talk more about this at another episode. Check out Oak Island, a small island which is near Newfoundland, Canada, and this is the most amazing treasure place in the world. And some people say that what is really hidden in there is part of this Templar treasure, which was so important and of such big value, not only metal value, because there's no reason to hide gold in a way like that. I mean, if you check out Oak Island, this is much more than just a treasure that you dig and later on you excavate it again. No, this is a bigger project. So we're not talking only about gold and stuff like this. The treasure of the Templars, it has to do with knowledge, with wisdom. And when we are already with these Templars, we are very near at later secret societies, because many secret societies, they see themselves in a connection to the Templars and their occult or esoteric knowledge. Talking about Freemasons, talking about Rosicrucians that were a little bit earlier, let's now have a look at the time of the Rosicrucians. That was a time, we call it the Renaissance, the Renaissance, Renaissance, but it's French actually, which means nothing more than the rebirth. Now what is that? It's the rebirth of antique values, of antique culture. Now, how did that come? And that leads us to Constantinople. Constantinople was formerly, nowadays it's Istanbul, but before it was Constantinople, it was East Rome. And in ancient times, there was a connection between this Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire, again to Egypt. Here it's now the Great Library of Alexandria, which Alexandria is in Egypt, and this grand library held a lot of information of this old stuff. Maybe some stuff was just copied over centuries, same like we see it in medieval times in the monasteries. They were copying, and the Library of Alexandria probably had a lot of really old stuff, Egyptian, pre-Egyptian, that was still there. And of course, many of this knowledge, when the Great Library of Alexandria was looted and burned down, and also there's different versions of it, and maybe it's not only one event, it's also a development that was going over decades, the decline of this Great Library. But some, or maybe a lot of the stuff was secured, was saved, and it went to what we nowadays call Greece, Turkey. It went to this Osmanic Empire. And there it was also for hundreds of years, it was just preserved. By that time, people couldn't use anymore this technology. They didn't even know what this is, or they had no use for maps, for geometry. They didn't have the skills anymore to work with these texts. But they were still there, and they knew this is old, and they knew that this is to be preserved. And so what I say, that Constantinople was also the place where much of this ancient knowledge was to be found. Now, coming back to the Templars and the age of the Crusades, it was, I guess, if I remember right, the third or the fourth Crusade, that never hit the Holy Land, but that hit Constantinople. It was led by the Venetians and the Knights Templars, and this happened in the early 1200s, 1210 or something like that, 1205, I can remember. And so there the Knights Templars and the Venetians, they attacked Constantinople, which was also a Christian country. They didn't go on any crusade against the Muslims. No, they hit Constantinople. It's a big story. We want to focus that already there, probably the Knights Templars got a hold on ancient knowledge, ancient artifacts. I'm not sure, but what I'm sure of, they got a hold on ancient maps, technology of navigation, seafaring, and that's why I say it's very much likely that already the Venetians and the Knights Templars, which had the best fleets, the best boats, shipbuilding in their time, that they already knew of America. I think that they found in Constantinople old maps showing that, hey, beyond the Atlantic Ocean there is another land. There's the Americas. They didn't know how to call it, but there's this new land. And so I'm convinced that the Venetians, with the help of the Templars, or they're both together, they already established a trade route between Europe and America, while America was officially not discovered yet, 300 years before Columbus. And for those 300 years, they had, so to say, a privilege of a trade route with America, a rich continent. And that's where all the gold came from that poured into Europe, that then the Venetian bankers used. But hey, that's another story again. But interesting that Constantinople was also one of these places where this knowledge was. And yeah, to come back to the Templars, when then Christopher Columbus, when he sailed to discover America, and I say it was a rediscovery. It was just, now we make officially, because we couldn't hide it anymore. Because by that time of Columbus, already more people in Europe, Spanish, Portuguese, they were developing ships that, so sooner or later you couldn't just hold it secret anymore, this America story. It was obvious they will discover it soon. So it's time to make it public. But when Columbus went to America with the Santa Maria, his ship, I already, for decades, I wonder, the big sail of the Santa Maria, it has in all pictures, and when I was a kid I had a little model of it. It has the red cross of the Knights Templars on it. Not the Spanish flag for what they were going on this big journey. No, it was the sign of the Knights Templars, which by that time were already for 200-300 years out of existence. So why is that? Because it's just making officially, we now discover the continent that's already in our possession. That's so to say. Yeah. So the Templars, they are also, of course, in history, a group that had a hand on this ancient knowledge, and they were dealing with it, and some parts of it might even have found their way to the American continent, maybe to Oak Island. It's not sure, we don't know what Oak Island is really in there, but it's one of these possibilities. Yeah, now from the Templars, now we move on to Rosicrucians and meet a time in Europe where the Renaissance started. And how did that come? Constantinople by that time, and it was after this crusade against Constantinople, Constantinople got weaker and weaker. They never really recovered from that. And in the 15th century, exactly at 1452, then Constantinople was overrun by the Osmans, by the Turks. It was the legendary Sultan Mehmed, and he overran the Byzantine Empire and ended it. And 1452, such a big mark, this is where Constantinople fell. And the Hagia Sophia, one of the greatest buildings, greatest churches in Christian history, turned to a mosque. Very symbolic. And of course, this marks a development that was going on also for decades. You know, this Byzantine Empire was shrinking more and more until it was only this little city left, and then it was finished. But in this time of decline, and in the last decades of Constantinople, of course, the people who were living there, they knew they had no future. They knew this Ottoman Empire is all around them. They are getting stronger. Of course, they tried to get help from Europe. You know, help us, our Christian brethren. but they didn't get it, and they knew from this crusade ages they cannot trust really, or cannot wait until help coming from Christian brethren. So they knew what was going to happen. And of course, in the decades before the final fall of Constantinople, a lot of this knowledge was brought out of Constantinople. Again, we talk about artifacts, we talk about values, gold, art, but we also talk about knowledge, we talk about texts, we talk about writings, ancient texts. We talk about scientific writings, navigation, how to make compasses and stuff like that. And all the stuff was brought from Constantinople to Europe. Where? To Italy, of course. Because for the Constantinoples, for the Byzantines, they were part of the Roman Empire. That's what was their state. The Byzantine state is East Rome. So when this is falling, of course, where can they flee to? They flee to West Rome, they flee to Italy. And by that time, Rome, the city of Rome, had no relevance at all. It was just a small village. They all went to northern Italy, Florence, Milan, these were the Siena, this were Genoa and so on, Venice of course. These were the places that were in power. And so all this ancient knowledge poured into these North Italian cities, and there they kicked out, they started the Renaissance. Because these people were reading the texts. And I want to focus on one aspect now is the Hermetica. The Hermetica is a series of texts that were claimed to be written by Hermes Trismegistos, or the Egyptians, that's the way the Greeks called him, or the Egyptians called him Thoth. I know you in America you say probably Thoth, but the TH, I doubted that the Egyptians had this TH, so it's Thoth. And yeah, this is, for some it's a god, same like Hermes Trismegistus, the same figure, it's a god. But others say, and I'm more on that side, they say no, this was a man, this is human knowledge. But it was so special that a man was made to a god, you know, the god of wisdom, the god of magic. And so these Hermetica were texts that were coming out of the hand of this Hermes Trismegistus and Thoth. Now this makes them very interesting, because that would say these texts are older than the Old Testament. And so in Europe this was, yeah, we might use this modern word, there was a hype in Europe about this Hermetic texts. That because they said, wow, this stuff is older than what we have in the Bible. This stuff comes from old Egypt, and maybe even it has a connection to pre-Diluvian cultures. And these Hermetica, they were texts of spiritual quality. They were spiritual texts. They were not so much on technology, but they were spiritual. And this is very interesting. And it caused a huge hype. And of course, Rosicrucians and other secret societies, they formed around this. And try to get connection with these Hermetica. Very interesting stuff. I've even got a small picture here of this Hermetica. Where is it? Ah, here we go. So just one of the books. There's so many of them out there, and it was yeah. That's another way of showing how information from ancient times, how they got an input into our European thinking and what happened out of it. Because out of the Renaissance then came, of course, ideas of humanism and stuff, and it goes on. Very interesting, yeah. Yeah, we also have archaeological finds. Because most of the stuff I talk about, it's not to be found in a museum. Yeah? We don't see these artifacts. They are secret. The ones that have a hand on them, they keep them, they hide them. It's always hidden. This stuff was never showed in public. There's never an exhibition with this. Yeah? But interestingly enough, we have even in public, in museums, some examples of ancient technology. And there's interesting stuff, like this one. This is a picture of the so-called mechanism of Antikythera. Antikythera. Well, that's Antikythera. That's the name of a little island in the Aegean Sea, somewhere between the Greek mainland and Crete. Somewhere in between is the small island Antikythera, and there nearby they found underwater in an old galley that was discovered. They found this piece. Now, of course, you see it's baked together, but they were observing this with X-rays and all kinds of stuff, and they saw that there's dozens of wheels. This is a fine mechanical apparatus. This is a machine, so to say. And it's definitely, I'm not saying this is some of this old ancient stuff. This is Greek. This is Greek, I've no doubt. This was used in Greek. But also this shows that the Greeks still had a connection, technical knowledge that seems to have an old tradition. And in Greek times, still you could work on things like that. So it's not that like we always think, the Greeks, you know, people in these ancient times, they were only having a spear in their hand. I mean, there was fine mechanics. This is difficult to make, but we don't even know what this apparatus was about. There's theories it has to do, it's like a chronometer and a calendar and stuff like that. Also interesting, because I told you about the connection of calendar, time and power. This goes in the same direction. But it's just one example of that we have, that in the ancient Greek times, there was still some of this, like an echo, some of this technology was still there. Interesting find, this one here. Yeah, so from Greece is one of these sources of this old knowledge, and the traces go back. It's from Greece back to Alexandria, and then Egypt, and back to the very ancient times. So now I want to put one more example out there of secret societies trying to get a hold on this stuff, in a sense of gaining power. And now we go into the modern times, we go into 20th century, and go to the time of Hitler and the Nazis. Because they also had tried to get a hold on this ancient sources of power. That was a big thing in the Nazi time. And they had their own organization for that, and it's this here. Now, it's written in these runes, which is this Germanic letters, and it's in German. I can read it for you. It says, Deutsches Ahnenerbe. That means German ancestors' heritage. And the idea of this was that they wanted all over the world where they thought that there might be remnants, pieces left over of this old culture. They want to get a hold on it. This is also another example of how real history was made to fiction by Hollywood. I mean, you all know the story of Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark and stuff like that. And there's also the German Nazis that try to get a hold on this. And this is true, but this is not fiction. They were doing this. So, I mean, today, in this episode, I only looked at the Western tradition of secret knowledge. The map is, again, it's Egypt, it's Greece, it's Jerusalem, it's Rome, it's Rennes-le-Chateau and stuff like that. But there might be remnants in other parts of the world as well. Check out India and stuff, and we will talk about this also, but not today. Today only we see this Western tradition, but these guys from the Deutsche Ahnenerbe, they were looking worldwide. They were having expeditions up in the Himalayas to maybe find connection to Shambhala and stuff like that, hidden empires within the earth. These guys were also going on this Antarctica expedition. Maybe you find traces there, and this is also hot stuff, the Antarctica. Again, another episode will come. But what I want to show is these are in the same continuity. It's the approach of getting a hold on these ancient technical, mystical, spiritual knowledge artifacts on this wisdom, on this knowledge, because knowledge is power. And they were doing everything to get a hold on this stuff. Even the story that I told you last time about Otto Rahn and the Holy Grail is to be seen in this context, you know. They thought also maybe the Grail has also to do. I mean, the Grail also, it's another example, isn't it? It's an artifact. It has its roots in Jerusalem. You can connect all these things together. And so what I see in there is sort of like a red thread. There's a continuity in history that these artifacts and this secret knowledge, and we're talking about both. We're talking really artifacts, technological stuff, but as well as texts that are technical texts, how to build construction plans. We're talking about maps, very important, but also about spiritual texts like the Hermetica, spiritual truths, what is going on, what is a soul and stuff like that. And all these things promise power in this world. And to me it looks really like that throughout history, the search and the gain to get a hold on these things, to get this under control, this is the engine for wars. I mean, I was talking to you about the Gulf War and the American military checking out the National Museum. We're talking about the Crusades. What was leading all these people there? And also even the other wars that we mentioned, maybe the Babylonians coming to Jerusalem and the Romans, maybe already they had the same motivation. Maybe they wanted to get a hold on this special stuff that was kept in the temple, in the Solomonic temple. And this was stuff that has significance not only for the Hebrews or for the Egypts or for the Greek or for the Babylonians, but this has to do with life, with mankind. So we're talking about really something big. And to me it looks as if throughout the centuries, this was the goal of many powerful people. Now one more question is, can you still use this stuff? And I doubt it. It's similar to when I told you the story about the knowledge of time and the golden heads, that this all degenerated, and in later times you didn't know anymore what to do with this. Just a tradition, but well, you have to wear this crown, but you don't know what it means or what it does to you, or what you can do with this crown to others or whatever. I guess most of it got lost, but I'm not so sure about that. Of course, the secret societies, some of them claim that they kept this knowledge. But then again, why not publish it and make it open? And whatever we can get out of these artifacts, use it for the benefit of mankind. And there's no use in hiding it all the time. And you see all the ones that really want to have power, they want to get a hold on it and use it then as a tool of power. So I guess it's would be more helpful if we put the things open and see what we can do with it. This is a common heritage. You know, this is heritage of mankind. This is not should not be in the hand of some groups only that say, well, we use it against the other ones, or in the hands of some secret societies. Oh, now we get so powerful, or like the Knights Templars that get big and all this. It's a common heritage thing. And it's, of course, a very, very good question. What could we do with a technology like that? And another question is, but this will be my end, and it's just, so to say, we open the door for some future episodes that are still to come. Can we maybe in nowadays that we are more scientific and more technological than our forefathers, maybe can we reconstruct stuff like that? Can we back engineer something of it? Can we learn of it? Can we understand this? And this is opening a portal into a whole new subject, something like a breakaway civilization, something that there are civilization, or one or maybe more, that are next to our existence, parallel, but in another state. People that are using another technology. And this will be part of future episodes. For now, what I wanted just to make clear is get a look on this basic knowledge, and get kind of a mind map, but also a map on Earth. There are certain places, certain histories, and just that we have, so to say, an overview. This is what this episode is for. And then on each of these small chapters, we can dig deeper and discover amazing stuff. Yeah, and so if this was inspiring for you and if this is helpful for you, we would be happy if you support us, if you support our work. You can do that by hitting the donation button. Of course, in our world, every bill has to be paid. But also you can help us just by spreading this, spreading our YouTube channel. And anyway, we're just happy that when you give us an open ear, because wisdom, knowledge, our ideas to make it free, to make it free flowing, free share, because we trust in human beings, we trust in man, that we can use this for the best of us. And I believe that's a better way than holding the stuff always in esoteric, in secret, in hermetic. See, the hermetic is the same thing. Hermetic, what does it mean? It means closed. Hermetic, you know, you close something up. And I guess maybe now it's the time to open up these doors and let this stuff come out to serve all of mankind. And not to use it only for certain secret groups that are developing these things and maybe even developing certain technological stuff out of this, and which we cannot use and which we don't know about. Okay, well, this is the perspective of some future takes we have on this. For now, I say thank you, and yeah, dig deeper into this stuff. This is the red thread. This is the secret engine of history. And well, thank you for your time, and I hope you'll be joining us next time again. See you. Bye.